to address the elephant in the room, even though I'm not an elephant and this is not a room, I'm in the car. And that's because it's Thanksgiving, and I don't want to record inside when my family's here. Like, that's just not happening. There's going to be too many noises. I feel awkward about it. You know how it is. Anyway, I have things to say because I went to see Wake Up Dead Man last night, and I've seen the first Knives Out. I've never seen Glass Onion. And I like Knives Out. I think it's an interesting murder mystery. The characters are all very fun. And Wake Up Dead Man, I was excited for it. I was like, huh. You know, I never really thought I would go see it, but then we just were going to go see a movie. I'm like, I guess that's out. I guess I'll go see it, right? It was just kind of the thing that we ended up going to see because nothing else was super interesting other than stuff I'd already seen. But anyway, I went and I was very, I didn't see any of the trailers beforehand. I was just like, yeah, I guess I've seen the first one. I'll go watch it. And I knew it happened at a Catholic church. I did not realize how very much, like, you could almost call it a Christian movie. It's not, because a Christian movie has like a certain stigma around it, which is bad, and understandably so. But it ultimately, I was surprised by what a positive view of religion the movie presents, because it does have a certain skepticism and a certain like antagonistic approach to religion where it's like, there's a problem here. And there is, I think. There's a lot of problems with the church. But I think I was happy with how much it showed that the church is ultimately a positive force in the world. Even if I don't really know Rian Johnson's religious beliefs, and even if he's not a Christian or whatever, I was very pleased with, like, I was like, you know what? Because it is. And anyone who's like, oh, the church is like, I don't know. It just seems a little bit silly. I think I would have liked the movie significantly less, And even though I don't like Christian movies. Like, I just don't. And most people don't. There's some good ones out there, but it's very few and far between. And it's because I think Christian movies don't show how, like, real people, I guess. Like, you watch God's Not Dead, and people in that movie don't act like real people, especially the bad guys, like the atheist professor. He's not a real person. Like, that kind of person doesn't really exist. He's a caricature. And in Knives Out, even if to a certain extent everyone in the movie is like more of an exaggerated personality, I suppose, they all feel real enough. And I would say that was even more so in Wake Up Dead Man. In Knives Out, people did feel a little bit more characterized, and I would still say there's a little bit of that in this movie. Like, Psy is fairly characterized, and his political stuff didn't really feel necessary. It didn't really go anywhere, and it was a little bit like, okay. If anything, this is a perfect Thanksgiving movie because it touches on religion and politics, which is crazy. But I don't know. There's something about going to see a movie in the holidays that's just kind of fun. I was in a pretty full theater. It wasn't a big theater. I went to a fairly small theater. Maybe there was like 6 rows of seats, but it was pretty full. And it was just fun to go see movies in the theater. And maybe I would have enjoyed Wake Up Dead Man less had it not been in the theater. There were certain moments in the movie that I was like, oh. And it was like, if I hadn't been in the theater, I think they would have been less impactful. And I'm not really into like the whole like how movies are made and lighting and stuff. Like, I don't know. I know a little bit and I'm interested in it and I like it when they do it, but I'm not like, oh, the lighting didn't work for me. Like, I just don't think like that, I guess. But I did like the movie. And I would say that the main priest character, I think Father Jed, it was either Jed or Judd, but I'm pretty sure it's Jed. And he is just such like even though he has his flaws, obviously, and everyone does. And I think when you present somebody as perfect, then you get into the territory of, oh, this is no longer interesting. But he does have his flaws, and he genuinely does like believe that he killed someone at one point, and like he thinks he knows he's capable of it, and he thinks he might, right? And I find that interesting. He's not the perfect character, but he is very passionate about his faith, and ultimately it's presented as a positive force, as religion is presented as a positive force, because the ultimate conclusion that he comes to is that I don't need to find out who did this. I just need to be the pastor or priest or whatever that this community needs right now. And I thought that was really nice, and obviously they eventually bring the culprit to justice. I wouldn't say I saw it coming. Early in the movie, I was like, I bet it's her. Just because it felt like a twist, and I guess spoilers or whatever. But the person that it ended up being, right? I was like, I bet it's her, I bet it's him. Like, there was different people at different points. But at one point, I guessed right, I guess, technically. But by the end of the movie, it was kind of a surprise, but I was like, oh yeah, I guess I did guess that at one point. And, there was just enough twists where it was like, huh, I don't really know what's going on anymore. Every time you think you figured it out, there's a new twist, right? And I like that. And then, even if Benoit Blanc, the lights just went out, that's crazy. But anyway, even if he's ultimately very much a skeptic of religion, by the end, he does learn a lesson too. And if this was a God's Not Dead movie, he would have been dead and also maybe converted to religion. Like either he's going to convert or he's going to die, or both, if it really is like God's Not Dead. And thankfully it's not. We want more Benoit Blanc stories, don't we? Maybe, I don't know. But you know, at one point he just goes off on like how much he hates the church and everything. I was like, whoa, like, and I thought that might be the thesis of the movie, that ultimately the church is a failed organization that needs to just be demolished. But it wasn't, you know, and it ended up being the thesis was, no, we should have the church, which I thought was very interesting because, you know, it portrays just such a picture of like a very corrupted church, which is very real. And like, obviously in the Catholic Church, in any church, any denomination, it's not exclusively a Catholic thing. There just is so much corruption, and there's a lot of because it's human error ultimately. Like it's not that the church is bad, it's that there's a bad person leading the church, I guess, you know, because the concepts of the Bible and the church, I think, are the way they are. It's just that we mess them up. I'm not going to get into religion. It's not like I'm not qualified to speak in any of that, but I did find it very interesting. I would say that something I noticed, just because we're talking about the movie, I guess, it was like much more, it was like a darker color palette. I felt like Knives Out was like brighter. There was more colors, I guess. And maybe that's just the way it is because of the movie. Like Wake Up Dead Man, obviously happens in like a church, and like it's just very like browns and grays, and it obviously there was like red was a big color in the movie, but like it felt just like less saturated than I remember Knives Out being. And maybe I'm remembering wrong. I just remember there being more colors. And I haven't seen Glass Onion, so I have no point of reference for that. But yeah, I really liked it. It was very interesting. And maybe it is the best Christian movie ever made. I don't know if that's true, and it's not a Christian movie, obviously, but I was wondering, I wonder what like an atheist's perspective on the movie would be. I'm very interested, because I do think it was like very balanced, where it's not like either side. I feel like either side could walk out and be like, yeah, you know, unless you're like a very hardcore atheist or very hardcore Christian, where you're just like very much like, oh no, I only let my child watch appropriate, because I mean, it's not a family film, like there's swearing and stuff. Like it is not a Christian film by any stretch of the imagination, but it does have, I don't know, it's like, it's not pro-Christianity, but it is, and that's very interesting to me. And yeah, I don't really know. I found that the main bad priest character, right, the way that he was portrayed was like very familiar to like people that I know, like of, not necessarily personally, but I know of these people. I'm like, I know who this is in real life. Like I've seen this pastor before. That's really bad. That's funny. My lights just went out. So I'm guessing that's like that means I should stop. I'm never gonna record a video in the car again. This is bad. You know, speaking of the lighting, my friend is like big into movies and stuff. So like he was like, he thought the way that they did like the lighting of like it gets dark when like the mood shifts, like it gets dark and bright. I mostly noticed it when they were talking about like the Road to Damascus thing. That was kind of cool. And there was like a lot of light, playing with light. Like obviously Rian Johnson does that sort of thing. And you know, maybe we hate Rian Johnson because he made The Last Jedi. I am somewhat of a Last Jedi defender. I think a lot of the choices in that movie are actually kind of interesting to me, even if it ultimately derailed the sequel trilogy that already wasn't on the rails. So like, I don't even know. Like, I don't think it's The Last Jedi's fault. I don't think The Last Jedi is that good of a movie, but I think there's some interesting stuff done, and at least it looks nice, kind of, sometimes. There's some parts of it that I'm like, that's cool. It is very slow paced. It's not very good. But you know, there's that certain type of internet troll that's just like, oh, I see you directed by Rian Johnson, therefore bad. Like, okay, I don't know. Is this a podcast? This is a podcast at this point. This is like, you know, we're going to keep making the screen dimmer until it's a podcast. Why have I been talking for 9 minutes? I'm not saying anything. I'm just yapping.